Montana Territory, 1874. The wind cut cold through the Judith Basin that morning, and the only thing moving on the horizon was a lone rider with a rifle strapped to his saddle and too much weight in his chest. Quinn Vallen had been riding since before dawn, the note still folded in his coat pocket. It was written in a rushed hand, smudged at the corners. He had read it once, then again, then memorized every word. Please don't come looking. I'm not worth the risk. But he had come, because that was Odessa Norell's handwriting, and she had never asked for anything before. The last time Quinn saw her, it was 6 years back. She had been 20, barefoot in the snow outside her father's cabin, holding a baby boy against her chest and staring down a man who had no right to call himself her husband. Quinn had wanted to pull her onto his horse then and take her away, but she had said no. She had said she could handle it. Now her husband was dead, the boy gone missing, and Odessa had vanished like smoke. He followed the trail north into the pines, where the land folded into itself and the silence grew thick. The cabin came into view just after midday, tucked against a bluff, half hidden by the trees. Smoke curled weakly from the chimney. He dismounted slow. His boots crunched on frost-bitten earth. No one came out. "Odessa," he called. Nothing. He pushed the door open. There she was. She stood in the center of the room, rifle in hand, her face pale and too thin, her hair pulled back with the same leather cord she used to wear when they were kids. Her eyes widened, then narrowed with something like grief. "Quinn," she said, "you should not be here." "Too bad," he said, stepping inside. "I got your note." She lowered the rifle. Her hands trembled. "I told you not to come. I heard you. I just did not care." Her breath caught, and for a second she looked like she might crumble. But she did not. Odessa Norell never crumbled. She turned her back to him and crossed the room, placing the rifle on the mantel like she had not just pointed it at a man who once braided wildflowers into her hair. "Why did you write it?" he asked. "I needed to warn you. Dawson's people are still looking for me. They think I know where the money is. Do you?" "No," she turned to face him again. "But they think I do. And they took Zeke." His chest went tight. "They took your boy?" She nodded. Quinn stepped closer. "When?" "4 nights ago. I was out looking for wood. I came back and the door was open. No sign of him. Just a mark in the dirt and a broken locket." She reached into her pocket and pulled it out. The chain was snapped. Inside was a picture Quinn had taken back in 71 Odessa, holding little Zeke on her lap, both of them smiling like they believed the world could be kind. "You think they went west?" "I think they went south. Toward Helena. There's a man there used to run with Dawson. Goes by Mace. He always wanted to get back at me." Quinn looked at her. Really looked at her. She was tired, worn down, but her shoulders were still set, her voice steady. She had survived a drunk husband, a town that turned its back, and now a gang hell-bent on punishing her for something she never took. And still she stood. "I'll help you find him," he said. "You should not." "You know I will." A tear slid down her cheek, and she wiped it away quick, like she was ashamed of it. "I do not want anyone else getting hurt because of me," she whispered. "I am not worth the risk." Quinn stepped forward and took her face in his hands, gentle but firm. His thumbs brushed her cheeks, wiping away the tears she could not stop. "You are the only thing worth it," he said. Her breath hitched. She did not look away. And then she reached up, slow, and touched his wrist. "Okay," she said, voice shaking. "Then let us go get my boy." They rode out before dusk, the wind sharp and the sky already graying. Odessa rode ahead, her chin lifted, eyes scanning the path. Quinn kept close behind, watching her, guarding her, like he had always wanted to do back when they were just 2 kids in a hayfield dreaming of a life they never thought they would get. They made camp that night near a creek, the fire small but steady. Odessa sat with her arms wrapped around her knees, staring into the flames. "He was only 3 when Dawson died," she said quietly. "Zeke barely remembers him, but he still asks. You tell him the truth?" "I tell him Dawson was a man who made bad choices. But I never say hate. I do not want him to learn that." Quinn watched her. The firelight flickered across her face, softening the worry lines. "You are a good mother." She shook her head. "Not good enough. Zeke is gone." "He is not gone. He is waiting. And we are going to find him." She looked up at him then. Her eyes were wet again, but this time she did not hide it. "Why are you still here?" she asked. "After all these years. After I pushed you away. Because I never stopped wanting to be." She opened her mouth, then shut it. She leaned closer to the fire, silent for a long moment. Then, in a voice so quiet he almost missed it, she said, "I did not stop either." The trees whispered in the wind. The fire cracked. And for the first time in a long time, Quinn felt like maybe the road ahead was not just about rescue. Maybe it was about coming home. The trail south wound low through dry prairie, where the wind blew with a bitter edge and the grass rustled like paper. Odessa rode with her eyes forward, reins steady in her hands, her coat pulled tight across her ribs. She hadn't spoken in over an hour. Quinn didn't press her. By midday, they reached a shallow ravine with a pair of cottonwoods growing thick at the base. Quinn dismounted first and scanned the ridge. The tracks they'd followed since dawn were faint now, horse prints flattened by yesterday's rain and half lost in the silt. But they were still there. He crouched low, brushing his fingers across the damp soil. 2 horses, one heavier than the other. Could be Mesa's gelding and a pack mule. Odessa stayed back, watching the horizon. Zeke wouldn't walk far on his own. They'd keep him close. Quinn stood and nodded. "We'll make Helena by nightfall if we push." She untied her canteen and drank, then capped it and tossed it back onto her saddle horn. "I grew up thinking Helena was the end of the world. My father used to say there wasn't anything good west of it." "Did you believe him?" "I believed everything he said until I turned 16, and he married me off to a man who broke horses by breaking their backs." Quinn's jaw tightened. He pulled his hat down against the glare and turned toward the sun. "We'll stay on the lower route. Less chance of being seen from the ridgeline." They rode on. By late afternoon, the terrain grew rockier, the air thinner. They passed a burned-out stagecoach station, its timbers blackened, the sign still hanging by one chain. Odessa avoided looking at it. She didn't speak again until they crested a bluff and the rooftops of Helena shimmered in the distance, just beyond the river bend. "We should wait until dark," she said. "There's a cattle shed outside town," Quinn replied. "Used to belong to a man named Cyrus Brenner. We bunked there once during the war. He's long gone now, but the place might still stand." She nodded. "Then we'll wait there." They reached it just before dusk. The roof had half caved, and the back wall leaned like a drunk against the hillside, but the straw inside was dry and the door still latched. Quinn unsaddled the horses while Odessa cleared a space in the corner. She worked quietly, fingers nimble as she laid out the bedrolls, her movements practiced and small. He watched her from the doorway. "How long did Dawson run with Mace?" 2 winters. Then they turned on each other. Guns drawn over a woman in Bannack who left with neither of them. She have a name? Not one they remembered. Quinn stepped inside and lowered himself to the ground beside her. The straw crunched beneath his weight. "You ever think about leaving Montana?" "Sometimes." She looked down at her hands, palms rough, nails bitten short. "But I have nowhere else. And Zeke was born here. He belongs to this land, even if it's cruel." He reached over and took her hand. Careful. Slow. She didn't pull away. You don't have to stay because you think you've got nowhere else. I stay because I've buried too many pieces of myself here to let someone else walk over them. Outside, the wind shifted. A coyote yipped once, far off, then fell silent. Odessa turned toward him, her face barely lit by the fading light. When I was a girl, I thought love meant surviving someone else. It doesn't. I know that now. Quinn's hand tightened around hers. I've seen how you fight for your son. That's love. She blinked, slow. And what's this then? She asked, her voice barely a whisper, weight behind every syllable. He didn't look away. This is me choosing you. Every damn time. She leaned forward then, just enough that her shoulder brushed his. They sat like that, not speaking, not pulling apart, until the dark settled full outside and the shed creaked with the hush of wind through cracked boards. When she finally lay down, she did so beside him, her back to the wall, her breath even. She didn't ask for comfort, and he didn't offer it with words. Instead, he stayed close, his presence steady, the space between them warm in the cold. Neither spoke of what would come in the morning, but both knew. Helena waited, and with it, the man who had taken her son. The frost hadn't yet lifted from the earth when they reached the edge of Helena. The town stirred slow, lanterns guttering out in windows and smoke beginning to rise from stovepipes. Quinn kept to the alley shadows, Odessa one step behind, her collar turned up, eyes sharp beneath her brim. They left the horses tethered behind a carpenter's barn near the outskirts, where the boards warped from years of thaw and freeze. Quinn handed her a Colt revolver from his saddlebag without a word. She checked the chamber, nodded once, and slipped it beneath her coat. They crossed into the heart of town as the sun cleared the hills, casting gold over the clapboard storefronts and mud-packed streets. A freight wagon rumbled by, the driver nodding absently. Odessa's gaze lingered on a boy sweeping the steps of the dry goods store, his cap too large for his head. He's younger than Zeke, she said, voice low, but he moves the same when he's cold. Quinn looked at her, then toward the east end where the saloons ran thick as flies. Mace wouldn't keep him in town. Too many eyes. He'll have someone holding the boy on the edge, maybe in one of the abandoned mine shacks. She didn't answer, just kept walking. They reached the back of Callahan's livery without drawing attention. Quinn knew the man who ran it now, Caleb Hunt, a Civil War veteran with a crooked spine and a memory sharper than most. He found him inside, cleaning a currycomb with stiff fingers. Haven't seen you in years, Caleb said. Figured you were dead or rich. Neither, Quinn replied. Looking for a man, Mace Langley. You heard anything? Caleb set down the brush and stood straighter. He's been sniffing around town the past week. Took up with a gambler called Doyle. One of my boys said they were asking about a rider from the Judith Basin. Odessa stepped forward then, her voice even. Did he have a child with him? Caleb's weathered eyes narrowed. He didn't. But Doyle mentioned hauling feed out to an old claim on Bareback Ridge. Just him and another fella. Could be something. Quinn offered his hand. Appreciate it. Caleb glanced toward Odessa, then back. You be careful. That ridge has been quiet for years. Not the kind of place folks go unless they mean to stay unseen. They left through the back and circled north. By midday they reached the base of Bareback Ridge, where the land heaved up in red rock and dry pine. The air grew still. No birds called. No wind moved. Odessa crouched near a patch of disturbed ground, her fingers tracing a broken twig. Someone passed through here. Wagon maybe 2 days back. No fresh prints since. Quinn scanned the slope. There's an old shaft up top. Used to be a silver claim. We'll go slow. They climbed without speaking. At the summit, the shack came into view, leaned to walls, rusted stovepipe, one shutter hanging loose. Smoke rose faintly from the chimney. Odessa's hand brushed his sleeve. We go around. I don't want him to see me until he's got a gun to his own head. They crept along the rocks, circling wide. From the rear, Quinn spotted a figure through the window, tall, lean, moving with a limp. Mace. Another man sat nearby, back to the door, playing with a deck of cards. Then he saw him. Zeke, curled on a cot in the corner, blanket pulled to his chin, eyes open and fixed on the ceiling. Quinn drew his rifle and nodded. We go in on 3. Odessa's mouth tightened. Not unless I'm first. He didn't argue. At the count, she kicked the door in. Mace didn't reach for his gun fast enough. She crossed the room in 3 paces, the Colt steady in her grip, and pressed the barrel to his chest. Move and I pull. The other man froze, hands raised. Quinn stepped in behind her, rifle raised. Let the boy go. Zeke sat up, dazed but unhurt. His eyes found Odessa, and something shifted in his face, fear melting into recognition. Mama! Her voice broke. I'm here, sweetheart. I'm right here. Mace sneered. You think they won't come after you again? Quinn drove the butt of his rifle into Mace's gut. He doubled over, coughing. We'll be long gone, Quinn said. And you'll be lucky if you're not staring down a rope. Odessa had already crossed the room, lifting Zeke into her arms. He clung to her, face buried in her neck. I knew you'd come, he whispered against her collarbone. She closed her eyes. I will always come. They left Mace and the other man tied in the shack, horses taken, rifles broken. As they rode down the ridge, Zeke tucked tight against Odessa's front. She turned once to look at Quinn. You didn't have to come this far. I did, he said. She was quiet a long while. Then, over the rhythm of hooves and the wind in the trees, she said, I don't know how to live without looking over my shoulder. He rode closer, their knees brushing. Then we'll make a life where you don't have to. She looked at him, then not with caution or fear, but with something softer, something steady. If we do that, she said, it has to be all the way. It will be, he said. I've never half loved anything in my life. Odessa said nothing more, only reached across the saddle space and took his hand, fingers threading into his like they'd been there before and were meant to be again. The wind picked up behind them, warm now, the sun breaking through the clouds as they left the ridge behind. The snow came early that year, blanketing the high meadows east of Helena in a silence thick as wool. They rode out before first light, following the lower creek beds toward the Judith River, where the land widened and the trees grew sparse. Odessa kept Zeke close in front of her, wrapped in 2 coats and nestled between saddle and arms. Quinn led the way, eyes scanning the tree-line, always listening. By the 3rd day, the mountains were behind them. The hills rolled wide and open, the wind no longer sharp but steady, carrying the scent of pine smoke and frozen earth. They stopped at a ranching outpost owned by a couple who'd once known Quinn's father. The man, Amos Dyer, had a wife with kind eyes and no questions, and she offered warm bread and a bed of hay in the loft with a quiet nod. Odessa sat near the hearth that night, Zeke asleep against a wool blanket beneath the ladder. She was mending one of the boy's gloves, her needle careful and slow, her eyes following each pull of the thread. They said you used to ride dispatch between Fort Shaw and Bozeman, she said, not looking up. Quinn sat across from her, arms resting on his knees. I did. On and off for 4 years. Kept me fed. Gave me reason to keep moving. You ever think about stopping? I did, he said. But I didn't have anyone to stop for. She tied off the stitch and set the glove aside. And now? He leaned back, the firelight deepening the lines by his eyes. Now I think I'd like to build a fence for no other reason than to keep a calf in. Maybe plant a garden, put up a porch swing. A porch swing, she repeated, a faint trace of wonder in her tone. That sounds like something borrowed from a story. He shrugged. I'd build it with my own hands. Wouldn't have to borrow it from anyone. Odessa stood and crossed to the window. Outside, the snow had stopped falling. The stars were sharp and low, the sky a deep indigo. She rested her fingers on the sill, her voice softer now. I don't know how to be quiet. Not really. My whole life's been spent watching corners, bracing for the next wrong thing. You don't have to know yet, Quinn said. You just have to want to learn. She turned to face him, her expression unreadable. You'd be tethering yourself to something rough. I don't come easy. He rose and walked to her, his boots silent on the wooden floor. He stopped close but didn't reach for her. His voice was low, meant only for her. You're not a burden. You're not something to be endured. You're who I've waited for. Her breath caught, just slightly, and her gaze dropped to the floorboards. You still don't see it, do you? He asked. You think you're a storm someone has to weather, but you're not. You're the break in the clouds. She lifted her eyes then, and they were full of something she'd never let him see before, hope. Still small but no longer hidden. I don't know how to let someone stay, she said. I'm not asking permission, he told her. I've already chosen. She stepped closer, slow as thaw, and lifted her hand to his chest. Her fingers rested over his heart, just for a moment, then slid down and away. I want that swing, she said. I want the fence. I want to wake up and not wonder who's watching. Then you will, he said. With me. She nodded, once, and the silence that followed was full, not empty, not fearful, but settled. The kind of silence that only comes after something hard has been spoken and received. Later, when the fire had burned to embers and the wind had gone still, she lay beside Zeke, her arm wrapped around him, her breathing steady. Quinn sat nearby, watching both of them, his back against the wall. Outside, the snow continued to fall, soft and sure, covering the tracks behind them. Ahead, the land waited, not untouched, not innocent, but open. And for the first time, they were ready to meet it together. They settled near the Judith River, on a quarter section of land Quinn had inherited from an uncle he'd never met, but who'd once carved a mark into a cottonwood, claiming the spot for someone with a steadier hand. The cabin was old but solid, with thick walls and a wide hearth. It stood at the edge of a sloping meadow, where elk sometimes passed through at dawn and blue flax bloomed wild in the spring. Odessa unpacked slowly, her hands careful with the few belongings they carried. Zeke wandered the field with a handmade whistle Quinn had carved on the ride over, trying to mimic the mourning doves that nested in the cottonwoods. His laughter came in bursts, sharp and sudden, like he didn't quite trust it but couldn't help himself. A week passed then too. Quinn spent the days reinforcing the porch and mending the stable roof, while Odessa repaired what she could: inside curtains from flour sacks, a braided rug from worn clothes. They kept to themselves. The nearest town was a day's ride west, and neither sought visitors. One evening, after the rain had passed and the fire was low, Odessa stood at the table sorting dried beans. Her sleeves were pushed to her elbows, and the light caught the edge of the scar above her wrist, faded now but still visible. Zeke asked today why I don't laugh much, she said without turning. Quinn looked up from the hearth, where he was oiling his rifle. What did you tell him? That I used to, before. She sat down across from him, her hands folded. Her hair had grown past her shoulders again, and she wore it loose when they were alone. I don't want him to carry the weight of what I lived through, she said. But I don't know how to give him something I don't remember how to hold. He already has it, Quinn said. You give him steadiness. That's more than most ever get. She studied him, then reached for the tin cup beside her, turning it once in her hands. I keep thinking about that first morning we left the cabin, she said. You didn't ask me to explain anything. You just came. I didn't need a reason. But I did, she said. And I never told you what it meant to me. That someone saw me, not just what I'd been through. He stood and crossed to her, resting his hand over hers on the table. You don't owe me anything. She looked up. I want to give you something. Not because I owe it, but because I choose to. Outside, the wind rustled the grass. The lantern flickered once and stilled. She stood and stepped close, her hand sliding up to rest against his cheek. I don't want to be afraid anymore. Not of loving you. Not of being happy. You never have to be, he said, voice low. She kissed him then, slow and sure, the kind that didn't ask or promise, only confirmed what had long been true. The next morning, Zeke woke to the smell of bacon and wood smoke. Quinn was already outside splitting kindling, and Odessa was stoking the stove, her movements easy and unhurried. He climbed onto the stool beside the table. Are we staying here forever? She smiled, not just with her mouth, but with her whole face. We are. In spring, they added a chicken coop and planted potatoes in the soft earth behind the cabin. Quinn built the porch swing with cedar from a downed tree, and Odessa stitched cushions from old saddle blankets. Zeke helped fence in the pasture, his hands small but eager, and by summer he could ride bareback along the creek without falling once. On Sundays, they read from the tattered Bible Quinn's mother had once carried in her saddlebag. Not for the sermons, but for the calm it brought, the rhythm of verses spoken aloud in the quiet room. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the last light touched the hills, Odessa stood beside the porch swing, watching Zeke chase fireflies. Quinn came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist. I bought a ring, he said, voice warm against her ear. She turned, brows raised. I put it in a drawer, he continued. Been waiting for the right moment. Her hand found his. I don't need a ring to know what we are, she said. But I'll wear it. Because I want to. He kissed her forehead, then her temple. When? Now, she said. Right now. He fetched it from the drawer. Silver, plain, with a small engraving inside. The year and her name. Nothing else. She slid it on, and it fit without effort. The next day, they were married beneath the cottonwood. Just the three of them and the wind in the grass. Zeke held a bouquet of wildflowers and beamed like the sun had come down just to watch. Years passed. The garden grew. They added a smokehouse, then a second room, then a cradle when Odessa's belly rounded again in late autumn. The baby came with the thaw, a girl with dark eyes and a strong cry. They named her Ruth after Odessa's grandmother. Zeke grew taller, quieter, with a steady hand for animals and a knack for fixing broken things. He never asked again why Odessa didn't laugh much, because by then she did often, and without hesitation. Quinn never left. He never wanted to. They lived not without hardship, but with peace, which was rarer and more lasting. And every evening, without fail, they sat together on the porch swing he had built, her head against his shoulder, the land stretching wide before them. The long dark had passed, and the light, when it came, stayed.